So welcome to the Secure Dynamics TechCast. With me, I have Benny Lakonishok, who is the co-founder and CEO at Zero Networks. I hope I didn't mispronounce your last name.
You actually did that perfectly.
All right, great. I got something right. And then past guest, Malcolm Harkins, who is the Chief Security and Trust Officer at Symantec and previously at Silence, and Chief Security and Privacy Officer at Intel as well. Welcome, Malcolm.
Thanks, Ashwin.
So Benny, let's talk about the topic that we had discussed earlier, which I think is a very interesting one, and you had alluded to when we spoke, which is really the evolution of our security journey. And are we back to where we began, I don't know, many decades ago right now, which is it starts with protection. So talk a little bit about how that is evolving in your mind and what you're seeing, and then we can take the discussion forward.
Sure. So I think if you look back like 2 decades ago, 20 years ago, things were really in terms of security, how do I prevent things from happening? Like, let's put antiviruses everywhere and, the antivirus will solve all of our problems. And how can I take my internal network that's now growing and separate that from the internet so that the bad guys can't come in? And that was the mindset that evolved over the years. And then roughly towards 2010, a bit before that even, we came to the realization, but wait, like even with all of these prevention tech, the bad things are still happening. And it's actually pretty easy for them to happen from various internal initial infection points, and then, to do damage and to do whatever attackers want in the network. And I think one of the drivers of that was that people understood in like early 2010, 2011, 12, that it takes to detect something or to know something bad is happening. It's usually, I think the average was 6 months or something like that. And then people started to say, we need better detection, better visibility in what's going on in our network. We don't have good optics for the attackers. Plus with the rise of, everybody's using the SIEM and the amount of noise that was created for that, it was very hard to distinguish between the needle from the haystack.
Right.
So that was also a contributing factor to all of that. And then at that point, basically the UABA market started, the user and entity behavior analytics market started, who was really set to, okay, let's find the attackers. The market then shifted, I guess, more for covering the insider threat as the main use case, but that market is still very much potentially capable of finding the attackers. And one of the startups that I was at called Wato, which was in 2014, acquired by Microsoft, did that. It did both, but it was focusing on the advanced attacks and how can we find that in a good way. We had a very unique approach to it versus the entire market. Like we said, okay, we can use machine learning to dig through all of the data that we collected, and we collected different data sets from the other UABA market. We relied very much on the traffic and some events, and the market was very much, let's focus on the events that we collect. And we didn't believe that just having machine learning would solve this. Like we understood that machine learning can, if you set the threshold too low, it would just alert on many things that are benign. And that would just create more issues. So what we did is we had that anomaly detection based on machine learning that had a threshold set something very high. So Benny's machine is connecting to 50 other machines it has never done before. That's something that's really anomalous. And even that sometimes happen in a benign way. And then alongside that, we have a very deterministic set of detections, which will, for every of the known tactics and TTPs that attackers were using. And we fine-tuned every one of those algorithms for pass the ticket, pass the hash, golden ticket, etc., of all of the tactics that attackers were using. So that's what we did, and that was kind of like the big rise of detections. There are other things that happened. Then if you move a bit forward, you see the rise of the endpoint solution, or the EDRs, or the detection solutions for the endpoints or for the machines, which I think endpoint is king. It really won the game because it has optics into everything that's happening on the machine. All the memory operations, all the file operations, registry, network. You can get everything from the machine or most of the interesting thing you can see on the machines. So you have better optics. You can potentially have less false positive because of the granularity of what you know. And I think that's one. Ultimately, it also, enabled you to have better response, obviously, with a lot of acquisitions for many EDRs around that. You can think of, like Phantom, Demisto, Hexadite, a bunch of others that were required to strengthen the R in the EDR or the response piece of the vendors that acquired them. So that was that detection market that soared because of that lack of visibility and issues there. Now, what we're seeing in the last few years is that, okay, we understand that we have detections, we have better visibility, and those also provide some false positives. So it's not a silver bullet. It just provides us with more tools to see what's going on and to detect potentially what's going on, much better tools than we had 10 years ago. But can we really prevent this from happening? And many of the detection or the prevention solution today that started to rise in the last few years are around zero trust, which is a term, by the way, that I don't like, although it's in the name of my company, because it's a very overloaded term, very misused. Like people, what is zero trust? I don't trust something. Great, your door at home, you don't trust somebody and you need the key to enter. But does that mean that your door is zero trust? Obviously not. And then many things in the IT and security are now putting zero trust in their architecture or marketing, and they're not really doing zero trust. But really putting least privileged networking, which is a term I like best, or better network control hygiene of let's only allow things to connect the way they need, and everything else, let's not do that. And everybody's tackling that from a different angle is what you're seeing now. So that's like, I think the rise of the prevention, when things started, then the understanding of, hey, still are things happening, we need detection solutions, more visibility, and now, hey, things are still happening, great, we have the detection for it, but can we really make our security posture and hygiene in a way that we can start both preventing it or at least containing that somehow so that it's not spreading across the entire network or all of my assets. That's, I think, the rise of what's happening now with various markets all attacking it from a different direction.
Wow, I mean that's I think the most concise summary I've heard in the last 2 decades in terms of how security has evolved. So switching gears a little bit and putting Malcolm on the spot. Again, putting your CISO hat on. I know Benny mentioned this evolution. So, but one of the things that in my interaction with CISOs such as yourselves is, what do you actually turn off in order to bring something new, right? So Benny mentioned number of tools. So how does a CISO go about saying, hey, this particular thing has passed its prime, so therefore I'm going to actually turn that off in order to focus on something which is more? And is there a sense of, okay, I'm going to have this long tail forever and I'm going to keep paying this? I mean, you have wonderful terms that I can't even articulate, but in terms of the investment, and then how do you turn something off?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I look at it, I've always done what I call weeding and feeding. I like to garden, right? So what do you feed? Because it's got growth potential, it's nourishing, it's healthy. And what are you weeding? What are the things that are getting in the way? What are the things that are choking out the things that should be growing and adding value? Yep. But the problem is, and I think this is by and large an IT problem, in addition to a security problem. In IT, it's always more tools, more applications, more this, more that, and you get the equivalent of urban sprawl, right? Yeah. We have the same thing on the security side, and so we end up with this clutter of controls that adds complexity, it adds cost, and when you have complexity does two things. Complexity not only adds cost, but it also adds risk, and so we have this highly cluttered set of controls, and by and large you go, why is that? Well, to some extent, and I've done a lot of looking at this and I've seen it and stuff, there's compliance regimes in place that are looking backwards. They continue to have you check the box on things. And what we don't do, and I've talked about this a lot, is go through and objectively look at the control designs, whether it's a piece of technology, a piece of process, a procedure, whatever, and look through the efficacy of control and go, is it sufficient? Meaning it's designed and operated and run in a way to manage and mitigate the risk it's supposed to. Is it insufficient? Meaning that it is partially covering the risk, or is it completely flawed and not mitigating the risk at all? And I've done this over and over with a series of just benign questions. I don't care if it was when I went to Silence and you talked about traditional AV or traditional host intrusion detection. If you looked at old school NIDS and network intrusion prevention, right? If you looked at web application firewalls, I mean, you just go through the litany, heck, even passwords, right? You go through these litanies of things and you find that most of the controls we have in place are insufficient or flawed. And then when you look at it and you go, why the hell are we doing it? And then you go back to, well, I'm checking the box. I've got a compliance regime. My policies say I need to do it. Instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to blow up this entire thing. Now I've had the fun, the ability to do that going to startups from Intel, right? Because I didn't have a legacy. I could build from scratch without the anchor points of that legacy. But, you know, we have to, the heads of security have to take it upon themselves when they buy something new. If it's a new area that's a complete greenfield of technology and stuff like that, you're probably going to need new tools and stuff like that. But you got to constantly, again, look at where you've got insufficient and flawed controls and move to ones that are better. And so, you know, and Benny had mentioned this, you have this kind of sine wave from prevention to detection and response, and prevention to detection and response that ebbs and flows every few years, just like you have a sine wave of it's the endpoint to know it's the network. And so both of these things are cascading back and forth from prevention to detection and response, from endpoint to networks. And then the question becomes, what's an endpoint and what's a network as we move to the cloud, as things have gone into web applications, as we've got IoT, as we've got mobile devices. And so you have a broadening of what would be considered the historical network in the traditional enterprise, and a broadening of the devices beyond just the traditional endpoint, which people thought of as the laptop or desktop. And so you have this, again, expansion, and then these sine waves occurring.
Wow. So Benny, a question for you, and then we'll close it up with Malcolm, is what sorts of CISOs or organizations that are responding to what you bring to the table, right? Because clearly, I mean, you've gone through many successful startups, and you've gone through the sine wave that Malcolm was talking about, and you mentioned earlier. Is that a psyche? Is that a vertical? Is there I mean, what sorts of people are grabbing towards understanding, hey, Benny and Zero Networks, and I need this. I'm just trying to get a sense of who are the people who this resonates with.
So I think it really resonates with almost all verticals. I would say that usually the more medium-sized organizations are the ones that are looking to do more cost optimizations and how can we secure better, what's the new tech, and this is new tech. So there are, like, you know, some, let's say, financials that are, you know, more traditional. It takes more time to implement a new technology. We're still having great conversations with them. Actually, we have one financial that's moving faster, but generally speaking, that's a market that's moving slower, or a vertical that's moving slower. But mainly, like, we see public sector, like army, you know, government, municipalities, and we have retailers, we have manufacturing, we have oil and gas, energy. So really from like telecoms, so from every vertical, this is like something, once you do this right, if you solve that networking hygiene correctly and do really least privilege networking across your organization, you're in a much better spot. And then all of that fragmentation in the controls that you need as a security architect or security decision maker, you can really drive costs down, efficiency, and have better results at the end of it as well. So.
Great. So final question for Malcolm. Malcolm, again, you mentioned the fact that forward-looking CISOs, and they really, it's no longer just checking the box and saying yes to the compliance regime, but to be fair to the CISO, I mean, ultimately his or her neck is on the line. So how do you do the right thing? And what sorts of things are you seeing right now? And whether it's the pandemic that has caused people to realize that, hey, the world could change tomorrow and you better be prepared for it. So in terms of what sort of skill sets and what sort of approaches have you seen CISOs utilize right now to be effective, not just during this phase, but also coming out of it successfully and ensuring that whatever psyche they've imbibed themselves continues with the larger organization going forward, so people don't go back into their shells?
Yeah, well, again, you've heard me say this probably a little bit before, but fair to the CISOs, what does that mean? You got a damn job, do it. and your job is to manage risk, manage cost, and enable the business. And if somebody doesn't want to step up and own that, they shouldn't be in the damn job. That's the fairness that needs to be done. Yep. And CISOs need to quit whining about, well, so-and-so told me to do it, or legal made me do it, or compliance made me do it, and I don't have the budget, and blah, 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 blah. Do your damn job. CEO doesn't have an excuse for missing revenue. Yep. Or screwing up cost or missing a market timing. Why does the CISO always have the ability to wear Teflon skin and say, well, risk happened and it wasn't my fault, somebody else accepted it? Bullshit. Own it. And if you do, then you'll do the right thing the right way. It's tough, but these roles are executive roles. And if you don't want to be executive, get out of the chair.
You can't top that line, right? So again, Malcolm, thanks for your time. Benny, great to see the work that you're doing. And I love to hear the word least privileged network. I think it just makes things much more realistic than, like you said, the marketing people who've taken over the whole zero trust thing. So appreciate your time and good luck with everything.
Thank you very much, Ashwin.
Thanks, Ashwin.
Thanks, Malcolm.